What's up my people, welcome back, and in today's video we're going through routers and filters within make.com, everything you need to know working with these powerful tools. This is a continuation on our previous video which we touched on the very basics of Make, understanding the user interface, the various components you can work with to build your very first scenario. And just so if you haven't watched that video, go ahead and watch it. But yeah, let's get right into it. So this is a Make scenario we built last time. So it's just a simple scenario that has two modules. The first module is a weather module that checks to get the data for a specific city. In this case, that's Nairobi City. Then once it gets the weather data for a specific day, it's able to add those details to our Google Sheets row. So if I enter the module, you can see it. So it just gets the weather details for Nairobi for today. Then those details are added to a Google Sheets row. So you can see in this module that happens. So you can see we add the sunrise, the temperature, the status, and the description of the weather to various columns within our Google Sheets row. And just to give you an example of the Google Sheets, here's the Google Sheets itself. It's called weather spreadsheet. And in the first column, you can see the time the sun rose, the temperature, the average temperature, the weather status, and the description of the weather. But now we want to add a router so that you can be able to branch off the flow to be able to perform different tasks based on the weather details that have been obtained. Okay, so first of all, you're asking, what is a router? So a router is a module that enables us to branch off to separate paths or routes from a single module. Okay, so I'll give an example to make this make sense. So let's give an example that we want to run an automation once a customer makes an order. So once a customer makes an order on our WooCommerce website, a trigger will be sent to our make.com scenario activating it. Okay, then we want to save the order details to our Salesforce CRM. Then once we have saved the order details to the CRM, it gives back the customer ID. So this is the output that comes back once the order details have been saved to Salesforce CRM. But now we want to perform three different tasks once we have that one customer ID. The first task could be adding the customer ID and the order details to our Google Sheets row. Then the next task could be getting the customer's past orders. Then we couple it together with the current order. Then we send these details to our staff members so that they can use that as context whilst they are delivering on the customer's order. Then the third task could be sending the customer ID and their order details to our customer success team through an email. Okay, so those are three different tasks. I'm just thinking top of my head. I'm sure there could be better tasks, but those are three tasks we want to do once we've saved the order details and gotten the customer ID. So how do we do this? We need to have a router, and the router will serve to send the customer ID data to all those three different tasks. So you're seeing it will serve as an intersection from the module. So we have a module that saves the order details. Then the next module will be the router to send the customer ID to three different paths or routes. That's why it's called a router. So let's have this practical. Okay, so let's go to the Make scenario and see this practically. So there are three ways you can add a router to your Make scenario. So the first easiest way is just to right click on the actual connector, see this link, then you just click add a router. Then this will automatically add a router between your modules. Then the next way is just to add it from the flow tools over here. So the flow control tools. So click on that. Then you'll see router. Click on it. Then it appears in your canvas. Just delink this over here and link it. Then you can insert it in there in the middle. Then that's how you add the router. The second way. Then the third way is just to add it from this button. You see add another module. Just send it off like this. Then in the picking the router, you'll just come here and you'll see the module router. Okay, so that's the other way. So in this case, we want the router to send the data into two different paths. Both of them will be Google Sheets to simplify the video, but it's just an example to give you an example of what we can achieve. Okay, so in this case, let's first delete this one module so we can remain with two modules. Shift, drag over that, then delete. So here we have our router and it has only one path. Okay, so but we want to have two paths that has two destination modules. Okay, and that's the thing with a router, it enables you to have multiple destination modules. You remember in our past video we said that the source module is where the data is coming from and the destination module is where the data is going. Okay, so in this case the router enables us to have multiple destination modules, not just one. So to add another path, you just click on this plus. When you hover over the router, you'll see this plus. Click on it and it will add another path. Okay, so in this case we want to have two modules. Each of them is just adding a Google Sheets row to our Google Sheets sheet. Okay, so for that I'll just clone this Google Sheets module. To do that, let me right click on it, then click clone. Okay, so I'll just have that in place. Then let me unlink it over here then unlink this over here so that I can add it in place. So this is the second route. Then I can delete this empty module. So now we have two modules that are same. Okay, then let me click auto align to place them properly. So now that we have two destination modules in our scenario, the module is going to be executed simultaneously. It will be executed one after the other, and you can see the order in which they happen: first, second, and you have freedom to choose on the order. So how you're able to reorder the tasks that you want to happen first, you're able just to come over here, then right click on it, then order routes. Okay, then you'll see you can be able to alter this in place. So I can make the second one come in first, or the first one to come in second. So I've done that, then I click apply. Okay, so now you can see second happens first, then first happens second. Okay, then to see how data is passing through the different modules, we'll click on the explain flow button. So it's really handy of a tool, explain flow. You can see data comes from the weather, comes to the router, goes to the first module, then the second module. So that's how data is flowing through the modules. Now here's a good time to set up a filter so that we pass on the data to the first module, different data from the data that will pass on to the second module. Okay, so here's where a filter comes in. And what's a filter, you're asking? So a filter is a tool in make.com that allows or restricts data from passing on to the next module based on certain conditions. So in this case, we want for the first module that was adding the data for above 20 degrees temperature, we don't want to pass the data if the temperature is below 20 degrees. So the filter will happen that way. So, but also we'll have a filter for the next module so that we only pass the data to it if the temperature is below 20 degrees. So a filter works just like a filter does, is to allow or disallow certain data based on certain conditions, and we can see this practically in make.com. So to add a filter, what we do is just come here to the path itself that you want to add the filter, then add a filter. So right click on the path itself, then you'll see set up a filter. Okay, so you can give your filter a label. So it's good practice, I'd advise to be naming your filters. So for example, in this case, we want to only pass the data if it's above 20 degrees. So I'll do that. So you're seeing that's the label, above 20 degrees. Then the condition, so down here is where the conditions have to be placed. So but before configuring the filter, it's good practice to understand the operators that are available. So what an operator is, for example, we might want to check the temperature if it's greater than 20 to pass on the data. So that condition of greater than is what we call an operator, is what compares the data to the condition that we have. That's an operator. So we have different types of operators. We have a basic operator that checks, for example, if a certain value exists or doesn't exist. We have text operators if we're dealing with text data, you can see. So for example, if we have data that is a name, we might want to pass on the data if the person's name is John. So we'll be like, if name is equal to John, then pass on the data. So there are different types. So for example, if the name contains the name John. Okay, so there are different operators you can see. You can see them there. There are also numeric operators when you're dealing with numbers or numeric data for that, and also date time operators if you're dealing with date and time. Okay, also time operators, and so on and so forth. So you can see the different types of operators. But now in this case, let's now configure the actual filter. So for the first one is if the temperature is above 20 degrees, pass on the data. So for this, we'll add the condition. So if the temperature, so notice if I click on the input field, our bundle of data that we got from the weather module is obtained over here. So we'll click on temperature. Then we want it, because temperature is a numeric data type, and how we know that is we can hover over it. So you can see those brackets, then it has number. That's how you'll be able to know the type of data that you're working with. Hence, the kind of operators that you need to be working with. If this was text, we would use text operators. But now since it's a number, we'll have to scroll down to numeric operators. And in this case, we want to check if the temperature is greater than 20 degrees. So I'll put in here 20. Then click OK. So that's the first filter. Now let's add the second filter for the second module. Right click, set up a filter. Then let's give this a label of below or equal to 20. The condition is for the temperature. And this, since the temperature is numeric data, we scroll down to numeric operators. less than or equal to 20. Then click OK. That's how we have set up the filters. Then I've clicked on auto align so that below or equal to 20 seats is the first one we want to execute to come on top as meant to. Okay, over here I didn't save the label, so let me just create the label again. Okay, then you can see there greater than 20. Now that the filters are in place, we want to configure the Google Sheets module accordingly. So I'll click on the first one, which is below or equal to 20. Then the sheet name, so I'll click on it over here. You can notice we have 2 extra sheets on top of sheet 1. So in this case we want to click on below or equal to 20. So that's the sheet we want. Then the others you can just leave the values accordingly. Okay, then I click OK. Then for the next one, I'll pick the next sheet, which is above 20. Then I'll click OK. So you can see now that's configured properly. To see how data passes on, just click on explain flow so that you can see how data comes, whether to the router, goes to the below or equal to 20, then next goes to the greater than or equal to 20. If the data comes in here and finds that it meets the condition of the temperatures below or equal to 20, it's passed on to that module. If not, the data won't pass on. Okay, so that's the basics of filters. So now let's run this practically to see it happen. So let's have our Google Sheets up so that you can see that practically. So here you go. So now let's run the module. Click run once, and there you have it. So you can see here the data doesn't pass through the filter of below or equal to 20 because the temperature is greater than 20. So you can see over here the filter now has the number 1 label on it. So this means one bundle of data has been able to pass through because the condition was met in this specific filter. But for this upper one, you notice the filter has 0, meaning 0 bundles of data passed on to it. Okay, because the condition wasn't met. And if I click on the filter itself, you can see the temperature was greater than 20. That is a tick, so that was met. And just to see the actual data, I'll click on this number 1 over here so you can see the bundle of data that was gotten from the weather app. You can see the temperature is actually 22.19 degrees, so that works. Then if I go to my Google Sheets, you can see for above 20 sheet that data was added in accordingly. Okay, so that's nice. So now let's do this for a city that we are sure to be cold. So I've done a Google search and I've seen that Yakutsk, I'm sorry if I butchered that, but Yakutsk is one of the coldest cities in the world. So Yakutsk in Russia. So I'll click over here, then change this to Yakutsk, then click OK. Then just to see this practical, let me just run this module only so that I can see that data coming in. And there you have it. You can see the temperature right now is 3.98 degrees. So yeah, that's working properly. So now let's run this so that we can see this practically. Run once. So you can see the data passes on through the filter for the first module because the temperature is below or equal to 20, but it doesn't pass on to the second module of greater than 20. Okay, and if I click on the filter itself, you can see one bundle of data is passed on because the temperature is below 20. Then if I go to my Google Sheets, you can see in this sheet of below or equal 20, you can see the temperature has been added accordingly and the other weather details. Okay, so that's working properly. That's awesome. But now let's go into more nitty-gritties of the actual filter. So I'll note there. Let me right click on the link itself and set up the filter again. So notice over here we had ignored these 2 buttons of add and or rule. So what is and rule? This means we can add more than one condition to be met, so that for the data to be passed on, both conditions have to be met, the first as well as the second condition. So that's where the and operator comes in. If I use the or operator, means I'll have 2 conditions or 3 or whatever, but any of those conditions can be met for the data to be passed on. So let's do this practically for this to work. So in this case, we want the temperature to be less than or equal to 20 and also cloudy. Okay, so for that, let's add and rule, and notice this blue line extends for first condition as well as the second condition. This means both conditions have to be met. And if you use the or rule, you'll see the line will break over here. So I'll do that for the next one so that you can see that practically. Okay, so for this next one, I want the status, which is that, to be equal to, so status, if I hover over it, you can see it's text, so I need to use text operators. Okay, so in this case, I'll just leave with the default of equal to. So if the status is equal to clouds, then I want the data to pass on. So click OK for that. Then the next one, so the next filter, right click on it, set up filter. So I want the temperature to be greater than 20 or the status to be rainy. I know it seems far-fetched, but I couldn't think of a better condition. Bear with me. So I'll click add or rule, and you can notice the line breaks over here. So either of these conditions can be met for the data to pass on. It can be both of them or one of them. Okay, so the next one will be if the status, so I'll click on status, is rainy. Okay, then click OK. Then I'll click auto align, then run once. So here we have run the scenario, and you can see the data was able to be passed on for the below or equal 20 filter. So if I click on it, you can see both conditions were met, of less than or equal to 20 and the status of the weather being clouds. Okay, so if I go to my Google Sheets, I should see that. You can see it there. The temperature and the weather details were all added in for the second row. So yeah, that's working properly. So for the next module, you can see here 0 bundles of data were passed on because none of those conditions were met. If even one of them were met, this could have worked. So you can see temperature was not greater than 20 and also status was not equal to rainy. Okay, and if I go set up the filter again, right click, set up filter, you can see we have those two conditions. Either of them could have been met. Just one needs to be met for the bundle of data to pass on. So that's the difference between and or. I know it seems a bit confusing in the English, but and means all the conditions that you've listed need to be met. Or means just one of them needs to be met for the bundle of data to be passed on to the next module. So hope that makes sense. Also, another thing I wanted to touch on is in regards to the operations. So make.com works in regards to operations. Okay, so when a task is done, that is one operation consumed. Okay, so it's good practice to know the operations that are being consumed so that you're not wasting operations performing non-essential tasks. Okay, so for that, I'll give you 2 tips in order to save operations when you're running your make.com scenarios. So let's go through that. So when you run your scenario, you'll see these bubbles that show you the number of operations consumed for each of those modules. Okay, so you can see here has 1 operation consumed and here 1 operation consumed. The router consumes 0 operations because its work is just to pass on data to different paths. Okay, so for the first one here, weather data was brought back, so that's fetching of data, 1 operation consumed. So that we save on operations, it's good practice to leverage this functionality of run this module only. So you'll right click on the module itself and click on run this module only. This enables you just to consume 1 operation. Why is this essential? Because it enables you to see the bundle of data that you're working with within your scenario. So you don't have to run the entire scenario if only you want to see the kind of data that you get back from your weather module. So this is useful to only consume 1 operation, and therefore this means going henceforth you already have the sample of data that you can map within the following destination modules. Okay, so that's good. And another tip is disabling certain routes when you're running your scenario. So in this case, this means entirely we ignore running the scenario through this first route. Okay, so for this I'll show you how to disable the route. Right click on the route itself, then click disable route. So you'll see this icon appears, meaning when the scenario is run, it won't go through that specific route. So when we run this module, we'll see that in place. So you can see the data was only passed through this specific route, but none of the conditions were met, so 0 bundles of data were pushed onto that destination module of this Google Sheets. Okay, but no data was passed on through this first route, even if the conditions could have been met. Okay, so that route is disabled completely. This is very useful, especially if now you build bigger scenarios with many different routes and many different tasks that are happening, meaning that you can be able to disable a certain route, and therefore any module that's within that route, it can be 10, 20 or 30 modules, they won't consume any of operations if you only want to see the specific functionality for a specific route. So this saves you a lot of operations during testing. Only thing is, ensure to re-enable those routes when you're now deploying the scenario and actually scheduling it to start running live. Okay, so for that, just right click on the actual route, then click enable route. Okay, so that's quite helpful. And yeah, that's it from me. So hope you've been able to understand the nitty-gritties of working with routers and filters within your make.com scenarios. These are quite powerful tools when you continue advancing in your make.com journey. I can assure you of that. Also, keep an eye out for future videos that are coming out very soon. We're going to slowly advance the kind of features that we are working with in our make.com, so that you move from beginner level to intermediate to advanced, so that you can be an expert in creating make.com scenarios that drive real impact. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like and also subscribe and click on the bell icon down there so that you get notified when these videos come out. If you want to work with our team to build such powerful automations to automate repetitive tasks in your business, there'll be a link in the description to visit our website and book in a meeting with our team. Till next time, stay servy. Peace.